watching that game, I knew early that the Rams needed to get the early lead because Joe Burrow and the Bengals are a second-half team. They've been a second-half team really for their last 8 games of the season. And then going into the playoffs, you saw what they did against the Las Vegas Raiders. You saw what they did against the Tennessee Titans. You saw what they did against the Kansas City Chiefs. And then you expect them to do the same thing in the Super Bowl. Now, the Rams, going into the game, I didn't expect Odell Beckham to really play as well as he did when he was in the game. He had 2 receptions, 52 yards, and a touchdown. He was on his way to win an MVP. He tore his ACL. He'll probably be out for the whole season next year unless he comes back sometime late December, early January for the playoffs. And by the way, the national anthem, the country singer, fantastic national anthem. It reminded me not so much of Whitney Houston's national anthem in the 80s, but it was something close to that. It was fantastic. But going into that game, I think the Rams' plan was try to figure out a way to get Cooper Kupp free at some aspects of the game and use Odell Beckham as the secret weapon. And that's what they did early in the game. Odell Beckham was the guy that they were going to use for the long passes, the slant passes, and it was working. I mean, 2 passes, 52 yards, he was on his way. I think if Odell Beckham plays in that game for the full game, he gets over 150 yards in that game, maybe 2 touchdowns, and he is the MVP of that game. And really, what we saw in the first half, there was no running games. Mixon, who I thought was going to have a big game, completely couldn't run the ball. He did throw a touchdown, by the way.
Yes.
Chaz was right about that. So if anybody actually took his parlay, you probably won some money. But I thought that this was going to be a running game and whoever runs the ball better was going to win the game. I was wrong. But I wasn't off on the final score of the game. I thought it was going to be 24-21. Speedy picked the score 23-20. If you wanted to bet on Speedy's score, you would have won yourself a lot of money. But what I saw in the first half is it was back and forth. I thought the Rams controlled the first half very, very well. Both defenses were playing very well in the beginning, in the first and second quarter. What changed the game was the third quarter, that 75-yard touchdown, which was a face mask. Everybody knows that. Jalen Ramsey's face mask was pulled to the side by Higgins, and he ran it in for a touchdown. It absolutely changed the game. Gave the Bengals a lead, put the Bengals in position to significantly control the game. But then the fourth quarter came around, and that's where champions are made of. That's where teams figure out who they are. What's their identity? How are they going to win the Super Bowl? What did they work hard for to get there? What did they need to trade? What future they need to throw away, like the Rams did, to get them there? And the players that needed to show up, the players that they paid, the players that they traded for, the players that they practically built this roster around, showed up. Aaron Donald in the fourth quarter was an absolute beast. And if it wasn't for Cooper Kupp and the catches that he made at the end of the game, and yes, that was not a penalty on the Bengals, but they called a penalty. Yeah. Logan Wilson was holding Cooper Kupp, and then that put them on the 1-yard line, and then that's when Cooper Kupp caught that touchdown, and that put them ahead. As good as Cooper Kupp was, and how he won the MVP, and it was absolutely well-deserved. 2 touchdowns, 92 yards. It was very well-deserved. But the guy that showed up was the very guy that they drafted 8 years ago and has been a dominant force in the NFL. Has been the best defensive lineman in the last 8 years. And I'm not just saying best, the most dominant. Who I believe, when his career is over, will go down as the greatest defensive lineman of all time. And I'm talking about Reggie White. I'm talking about Lawrence Taylor. That's how good Aaron Donald is. And he showed you that it didn't matter if they were double-teaming him, triple-teaming him, trying to shift the guards to him, they couldn't stop him. When you look at the big picture of where that Super Bowl was going, it was really the dominance of the Rams' defensive line. It was the dominance of Von Miller blocking and smacking the ball around in the fourth quarter. Joe Burrow did get hurt early in the fourth quarter. It looked like he tore something in his knee. Maybe he tore a meniscus. Who knows? But he got back on the field. It shows you how tough he really is. And he didn't throw the ball very well in the fourth quarter. He didn't play like he played against Kansas City. That helped him get into that overtime and kick that field goal. And McPherson, who's been a big part of that offense, he didn't really do much in that game to really stand out, where we thought that McPherson has been one of the more deadliest kickers we've seen since Adam Vinatieri. What I saw, Speedy, was a Rams team that wanted it more, was a Rams team that needed and had to prove something. And Matthew Stafford, for everybody that was going to throw him under the bus because he played for the Lions 11 years of his career and pretty much flushed it away on a terrible franchise, went over there his first year and brought home a Super Bowl to his home city, L.A.
You always could stereotype a quarterback for not succeeding on a bad team, but Matthew Stafford has always been one of the best comeback quarterbacks, and you saw that all postseason long. Even when the Rams almost collapsed against the Buccaneers, big throw on that final drive to Cooper Kupp. Against the 49ers, down 17-7 in the fourth quarter. Big comeback there. And this game, too, when it seemed like the Bengals had all the momentum. He made a lot of big throws. And Matthew Stafford doesn't get thought of that way because he was playing in Detroit forever. But meanwhile, among 21st century quarterbacks, he's top 5 of those groupings in fourth quarter comebacks. So he definitely showcased that a lot more, now getting in bigger light with a better team, a team with a lot of stars. Cooper Kupp definitely showing out. Aaron Donald definitely showing out. Jalen Ramsey didn't really have a great game, uncharacteristically bad on some big plays and some penalties, but clutched up when he needed to in the fourth quarter. A lot of the other big X factors, I think, too, they were able to stop the run. Joe Mixon had a nice fourth quarter, but that was really it. He had the passing touchdown, sure, but we've seen this now with certain teams. You saw them shut it down to the 49ers, and when you look at a team like the Chiefs, who we were saying, oh, they can't stop the run and how they're going to win the Super Bowl in the playoffs, they stopped Derrick Henry mattered and the 49ers, and the Rams just kind of did the same thing, even though they were thought of as a bad run defense. So kudos to Raheem Morris for what they were able to do there, and also their offensive line, too. Pretty much after the first quarter, they were struggling. Trey Hendrickson was getting to the quarterback, DJ Reader was getting to the quarterback, but they really held their own the rest of the game, too, and their linebackers and their safeties play very well as well, which we thought was going to be a big question mark for the Rams. When you look at these other guys coming through, it's a roster of stars, but they need those little things to work out, and the coaching was able to get them going. Teams could take away stars all you want to try to, and then they need the other guys to step up, but the Rams' other guys stepped up too, and then Aaron Donald, the all-time great legacy he's on. He has 98 sacks already in his career, so if he plays another 7 years, you're talking about 180-something sacks for him, 170 sacks for a guy that was mostly a defensive tackle in his career. He is on that insane of a pace right now, and he showed it again. And Cooper Kupp, what a performance for him in the fourth quarter. That is clutch as you ever see from a wide receiver. Well-deserved Super Bowl MVP, but Donald not far behind. He was dominant as well.
Donald had 2 sacks in the game. He could have very much had 3 sacks in the game if they actually didn't take it away from him early in the third quarter. So I think that what you saw was 2 really talented players, 2 players that they drafted. Aaron Donald.
He was actually the 13th pick. He was actually drafted right after Odell.
And has been a dominant force at his position. Cooper Kupp, who was a 4th-round draft pick 4 or 5 years ago, and a person that nobody thought was going to take his game to that next level, and he's been absolutely fantastic for the last 2 or 3 years. So very well deserved. And Sean McVay, who I've been really, really hard on, and I'm not a big fan of Sean McVay. I think Bill Belichick really got the best of him a couple of years ago in the Super Bowl and shut down that powerful offense. But in this particular game, he needed to show up in the fourth quarter and make the play calls that he needed to make to get this team over the top. And especially late in the fourth quarter when he needed to find a guy, why not depend on your young wide receiver, the wide receiver that you paid a lot of money to, and the guy that's been clutch all year around. And that's Cooper Kupp, who was just fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Think about this kind of year. The most consistent year you probably will ever see game to game from a wide receiver. I know Calvin Johnson did it in less games with his record, but still, Cooper Kupp only had 1 game with less than 90 yards this year. That is insanity.
And it wasn't the Super Bowl either because he had 92
No, it
yards.
was against the Titans.
He was insane all season long, and he deserves every bit of all the accolades that he got. Has been as good of wide receiver we've seen in such a very long time. Say whatever you want about his size when he came into the league, and he doesn't have the length. He doesn't have the leaping ability. Well, it doesn't really matter because we've seen this with wide receivers like him, quarterbacks that have turned into receivers, the Julian Edelmans of the world. And Julian Edelman is nowhere close to Cooper Kupp. So what we're seeing is a special specimen that's just getting better and better year in and year out. And that shows you the type of hard work and dedication that this man puts into his game.
He came from an FCS school, too. Keep that in mind. Eastern Washington. He was setting records at college. He was doing very well, and he only fell in that draft because he got hurt that senior season, too. So he was able to overcome all that, fit in with the Rams right away, and now look at where he's elevated himself to another level.
Yep, absolutely. As far as the offseason is concerned, when you talk about the New York teams, the New York Giants, they have a new GM, They have a new coaching staff. I like what they're doing. They bring in a very good defensive coordinator from the Baltimore Ravens, who is very well respected around the league. Did they bring an offensive coordinator yet?
Yeah, they did. Chiefs passing game coordinator Mike Kafka, who I also remember as a backup quarterback somewhere, too.
And I'm hearing that Eric Bieniemy might leave the Chiefs. I believe that he wants to go somewhere where he could prove himself away from Andy Reid, where he could show that it's because of him on the reason why this offense is as good as it is. So I think that has a lot to do with why he hasn't gotten a job, because Andy Reid is there and he's the best offensive mind we've seen in NFL history. So why would they give Eric Bieniemy all the accolades when they have the great Andy Reid there? And that was the guy who the Giants hired that was going to move into Eric Bieniemy's position. And the Giants scoop him up. So far, so good for the New York Giants as far as the coaching staff. And now they're going to have to decide what they're doing with Daniel Jones. Now, we've heard what Dable has said. Dable believes in Daniel Jones, the special player that he is. And I think he is special. I think he can run, he can throw, he can do all those things that you expect a quarterback to do in this age of football. Now you have to see what they are as a team and where they're going to go in the draft. Kevon Thibodeau saying that the Giants are the lead team to get him. I don't know how he knows that. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, Eric Ebron predicted he would go to the Lions, so I wouldn't take that much into stock.
And where the Giants are drafting at 5 and 7, they're positioned very, very well to get two really good players in this year's draft and really position themselves moving forward with this new coaching staff and solidify themselves. Well, there's no quarterbacks in this draft class that really stands out where you're going to give up on Daniel Jones. Maybe they make a trade for a Kyler Murray in the offseason. I don't know what the Giants are planning to do. I don't know where they see themselves as an organization with this new coaching staff and with the ownership. I do believe that the Giants have a plan, and that's something that they haven't had for the last few years.
Two things that Joe Shane was noting that he was going to attempt to do. They're explore the market is one, try to move Saquon Barkley. We've been saying that all year. And also James Bradbury is another contract they are trying to move as well. He had a very good first year with the Giants, but kind of fell off his second year too. And the Giants have a lot of the young defensive backs on their roster too. So they're going to try to shop those two, clear money away. There's a lot of bad contracts they aren't going to be able to trade away, but they think they could try to move those two.
They'll definitely move Saquon Barkley. And there's a team that he came from that needs a running back. The weakness of this offense, this Buffalo Bills offense, is their running game. Why not go after Saquon Barkley? You're not going to have to give up much for him. Maybe you give up a third-round draft pick for Saquon Barkley.
I'll take Zach Moss in a 5.
I think that would be a smart move for the Buffalo Bills and a very smart move for the New York Giants. I think the Giants need to figure out who they are, what their identity is, what they're going to do next season going into the season, offensively, defensively, and how they're going to work this offense. Now, Dable, we all know what he likes to do. He likes to use wide receivers. He likes to use speed guys on the outside and bigger guys in the slot. Use those wide receivers and running backs as pitch players that you can use as wide receivers. So I'm going to be very intrigued and very interested to see what the Giants are going to do. As far as the Jets are concerned, so interesting this offseason for the New York Jets. They're going to have over $70 million, the 4th and 10th pick of this year's draft. There's some talks that they like the kid from Notre Dame. Hamilton, who did very well in the Senior Bowl, was one of the more standout players in the Senior Bowl and looked very, very good throughout the season. I didn't want him, but when I watch clips of him and watch how good he really is, he could be an absolute game changer for the New York Jets. When you look at Jamal Adams, you thought that, but Jamal Adams was a hitter. This guy could do it all. He's 6'4". He reads plays. He intercepts the ball. You could put him at the corner. You could put him in the slot. You could do everything, and he could keep up with any tight end in the NFL right now. He's that fast and that good, and he's long too. He's 6'4" for a safety. He could be a game changer for somebody like the Jets. Luke Kuechly was a linebacker, but he reminds me of like a Luke Kuechly type of player. And the Jets could very much think that he could fall at 4 to them. Now, there are stories coming out that the Texans really, really like him too, at number 3. So the Jets going to look at that. They could look at for offensive line help if certain players fall to them. As far as free agency is concerned, they need to get a playmaker. They need to find a number 1. They don't have one. I do like Elijah Moore, but he's still very, very young and wet behind the ears. I think he needs to have a full season to figure out who he is as a person. I do not make a move for Devontae Adams, $30 million a year. That's overpaying a player as good as he is. Maybe you trade for Amari Cooper, or maybe you bring in Robinson, who had a bad season last year, to the Jets, where you don't have to overpay him. Maybe you give him a 2 or 3 year deal worth about $60 million, and you get yourself a sensational wide receiver. Trying to figure out what they're going to do on the edges, which has been a very big weakness for the New York Jets for forever. And Zach Wilson, the growth of him. Braxton Berrios said something very interesting about Zach Wilson. He loves football. He's not in it for what it brings him. He truly loves the game. I think the year 1 to year 2 jump is going to be absolutely tremendous with him. So there you go. Braxton Berrios speaking highly regards to what Zach Wilson could be next year in his second year.